Okay, I'm Bob Lewis. I'm ambassador for the International Skydiving Museum, and I'm here with Ashton Young and Bonnie Young Askew. They are the great-grandchildren of Tiny Broadwick, the grandchildren of Verla?
Yes.
Verla?
Verla.
And we're here in Henderson, the birthplace of Tiny, or Tiny's hometown, if you will. And I'm going to discuss Tiny's childhood and what she meant to her family. I mean, as skydivers, we all love Tiny, but do we really know her? So this is part of what we want to do here. So I'm going to start with Ashton because he met her at the earliest time of his life. So when did Tiny first meet you? We'll go with that question.
I have a picture of her holding me as a baby in 1948. Of course, I don't remember much of it, but I have a photo of it.
Yeah, proof. And Bonnie, you were how old?
I was approximately 6.
And you two had both heard of Tiny's exploits, I guess, because this was the late 40s, so she had been retired for almost
Yes.
going on 3 decades at that time. So what did you hear from the family, or what did you know about your great-grandmother? Either one.
We knew she was jumping out of gas balloons. We knew she was, when she moved on to the parachute with Glenn Martin. We heard many stories over our lifetime, but
Did she communicate with cards a lot, or?
she wrote home regularly, yes.
And her and Verla were very tight. They were almost sisters, I guess, in age.
Yeah.
Because Tiny was so young.
Yeah. Yes, and the more they both matured, the tighter the knot became.
And Vera was more of the adult of the two, would you say, or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, when did she came back how often? I mean, every couple of years or so, or? Because she was out in California jumping with Martin and Broadwick before that,
Yeah.
starting in 1908. So I guess we'll give a little bit of history. So she was 15 years old in 1908, and she showed up, got a friend to take her to the state fair in Raleigh, Johnny Jones exposition, and so she went and saw the jump and went and approached Broadwick and asked him, and he said, I guess that's fine. He knew a deal. He jumped with his wife, Maud, before that. So then she talks him into it, and she makes a jump before she left Henderson. And so she'd already had Verla. Verla was probably how old at that time, do you think? It was 1908. I don't know. Maybe I'm asking the question where you get involved in math and all.
Very young, no more than 2, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay. So she left Verla with her mother, which,
Yes.
Now give me a second. Go ahead and tell me her mother's name.
Grandma Farmer's all we ever called her.
Yeah, Grandma Farmer.
Grandma Farmer, okay.
Her mom, whose name you want?
Tiny's mother.
Emma Ross
Emma
Thompson.
Ross Thompson, that's right.
Yeah.
And so Tiny, as soon as she had Verla, and this less than probably just about 2 years later, she met Broadwick and she made her jump, and Broadwick made the deal with Emma, or with Grandma Farmer, and then she was gone. I mean, so,
Right.
and then you guys, it was 2 decades, almost 3 decades before you guys came along. So she had already established herself.
Yeah, she was retired before we ever
Knew.
knew much
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Now, she never came back to live here. She was planning on it, I guess, and
The last time she came home, she was planning to stay. That was her intentions. Now she did have the hound dogs knock her off the steps, and she was injured.
that was,
Never really recovered.
okay, that was her last visit.
That was on her last visit because she went back to California, and I guess she went to Maxine.
Yeah, she went to Maxine.
So you guys had 25 years of off and on of her coming back and visiting, and
Yes, and
Yeah,
sometimes.
but, she never had a timetable. She would write and say she was coming, and she's liable to stay 2 weeks or a month or.
And so you guys got to sit down as children and listen to her. So tell me some of that. That's what I want to hear. I guess we'll start with you.
Well, I was old enough at the time she came home, and she was a California girl, and every afternoon at 5 o'clock, even in the old country home place, she would go to her room and call herself having a cocktail.
At 5 o'clock.
At 5 o'clock. That was cocktail hour for her. She did it faithfully every day. And of course, she loved having company, and I was old enough at the time that I done had a couple of children, and she invited me and my wife in, and she offered me a glass of scotch. And she told this story to numerous ones. She said, if you're gonna drink scotch, because a lot of folks don't drink scotch, and it'll save you a lot of money through the years. Well, I was one of those that didn't drink scotch, and I wasn't bashful. I told Grandma, I don't want no scotch. And she said, well, get you one of them little, I think it's Country Club beers in a little can about that big.
Brownie pack or something.
Yeah. And so I went and got one of them, and we started. I drank 2 or 3, and she was having her cocktail. And I questioned her a little bit about her career as she looked at it. And of course, you know, she didn't say as much about being the first woman to jump over our plane at the time.
So it was more stories about the fun she had, not bragging of what she did.
Right. I didn't never hear her brag about being the first woman to do this or first woman to do that. Now she would state it matter of factly, but I asked her, you know, and she was particular. 2 members that she particularly wanted to be carried on was that she really appreciated the fact that the Army asked her to demonstrate the parachute. And at that time, she knew that that might be important to save the lives of the guys in the Army, because they didn't have no parachutes. And
that would have been now I should know this.
13 or 14.
1913, 1940, June.
14.
Well, I hate that I don't have that date on the top of my head, but it's 1913, 1914. I believe it was June.
One was the first over our plane, and the other was to the Army, so I guess it's 1914.
Yes.
It was
Okay.
1914.
I believe you're right. 1913, a year before, she was the first lady to jump, and that was really just 5 years after she started doing balloons, and only really 10 years or less than 10 years from the rights, because the airplane was secret for so long. I mean, for 5 years they kept it under wraps, so nobody really, until really 1908, 1909. Did she talk about meeting Glenn Martin or going to any of the air shows and meeting any of the aviators?
Well, she didn't really tell me about her meeting Glenn Martin, but of course she was always referring to him as a pilot. They got to be pretty good buddies.
Okay.
I think they were had mutual interests.
Okay.
Martin wanted to have his plane shown, and at the time the carnival life that she had been used to was kind of going down.
Okay.
So she was getting attention through flying in his plane. So they were
working together. Now, her and Broadwick, what did she talk about their relationship as far as how he treated her? Was he fair or anything? Did she mention
I
anything?
never heard her mention any kind of a relationship with Broadwick or any of her other husbands. That was something she never discussed with me.
Okay.
She was also very proud of working in the airplane factory during the war.
That was, I'm thinking Ryan Aviation, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. She was very proud, and that would have demonstrating it to the Army and working in the airplane factory were the 2 things that she wanted to express to me over. Now she mentioned she was the first one to make a water jump and all that, but she kind of talked over that to the 2 things.
She was telling the stories more than bragging,
Right.
I guess. Huh?
And we got into the conversation about demonstrating to the Army.
Military, yeah.
And there's been some confusion over the years on those jumps. I think she jumped 4 times, and the first 2 jumps went okay, And something happened on the third jump that it went wrong. Something happened to the static line. It tangled or hooked or what. I really can't understand what happened, but the chute finally opened.
It blew her to the back of the plane.
Yeah, there's been a lot of confusion on that. It's important to clear it up. So, but it's probably hard to clear up. So yeah, so she did 4 jumps.
Yeah.
The third one posed a problem.
Yeah, because the story went out that she cut herself loose.
Okay.
Well, that never happened.
Okay.
Never,
That's
never,
it.
ever,
Never happened. Now,
Tell the camera that it never happened.
ever happened.
Oh, it never happened. And she explained to me. She didn't explain to me the problem. I've always heard it hit the back wing of the plane, but
There's been a lot of confusion. Even in my talk, I wasn't sure then. You've cleared me up.
I can't figure out, even if it hit the back end of the plane, why it didn't pull it.
Right. I'm guessing now, my supposition, if you will, was that she was afraid from the flapping that it would rip this parachute pack open,
Yeah.
and then her parachute would deploy before she was ready, and that, disasters occur then. So tell me what she did on the 14th.
Okay, she told me, quote, she said, I told them I knew how to fix it because it was concerning to the observers from the Army. She said, I can fix it. And she was sitting in her little chair, and she said, when I got on the ground, she said, I'm going to cut the static line. Said, it's not going to be but about this long. And said, then I can pull it with my hand. And said, if I can't pull it with one hand, I'm going to leave it long enough that I can put it with 2. Now, this is the 4th jump.
Okay.
A lot of people like to try to give her credit for the first free fall on the 3rd jump.
Okay.
Which, the way I see it, is she left that plane on a static line with the intentions of that pulling her chute. So I can't, even if she cut it,
Right.
I can't consider that the first free fall.
Right. And by definition, that was there were probably free falls before that, because of the crazy stunts that were going on with everything. But that was the first one where she actually had planned and said, I'm going to rip open my own pack. And I think that inspired Leslie Martin Irwin to, thank you, Leslie Irwin to do the actual ripcord design that like my father used and so many World War II guys used, and is still very, for reserve, we still use a ripcord in the sport parachute. So one last thing, and then I'll get to Bonnie. Did she want to return did she think about returning to North Carolina to live, or was she happy out in California, or was there family issues or something with her leaving at such a young age, anything like that?
As far as family issues at the young age of her leaving, I think it was just the circumstances that she was living in. I mean, they were living in property, and she was working in the cotton mill. She wasn't making any money. She was a child, really. And
With a baby.
It wasn't any family problem per se. It's just that she decided to let her mother raise my grandmother. But now when she left, I've always wanted to know what year she first returned, and unfortunately I don't have that information. Now, when she came home before her death, she came home with the intentions of making North Carolina her home.
Okay.
But
she got
after the fall, she went back to California. But she was never a North Carolinian. She was a Californian all her life. She was a Californian. She just loved California. Yeah.
And so she'd stay for weeks, maybe a month or so, and then return back. But then the last trip, she got hurt. She fell, I guess, at the back porch. We visited the house. Bonnie and I went to the house where she came and visited all the time, and saw the back porch and all that. So, and she was how old was she then? She had to be in her 80s at that point. Because that would have been 1977, 1978, I'm guessing.
78 is the year she passed away.
And
so
the fall happened,
prior to that.
Probably 75. I'll
70,
say.
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But that was her last trip home other than
Right.
her
Yes.
final trip home.
Yeah.
So Bonnie, when did you first start you came after Ashton, so so Tiny was gone when you were born, and then when did you first encounter her, get to talk to her, get to know her, I guess?
I think I was about 6 years old. Like I said, I had heard my mom talk about her and people in the family and what she had accomplished and all. And when she came back home, I just loved listening to her stories. I loved her 5 o'clock hour in the afternoon, because that's when she would let you come in, and she'd be sitting in a chair and I'd be sitting at her feet, and she was telling me all of these experiences that she had, and landing on trains and cemeteries and people thinking she's an angel floating down.
That's the
and
story where she
running.
landed in white
Yeah.
landed off the target, I guess, and
Yeah.
landed in a cemetery. She was wearing her doll girl outfit, so they think it's an angel descending.
Exactly, but she just instilled I don't know, it made my blood hot back then, and I just love it, y'all.
So she inspired you to
Yeah.
want to do, and you've
Yeah.
made jumps.
Yeah. So I was the
And she was with you
She
when-
was with me when I made my first jump. She certainly was.
And what year was that?
74, I believe.
And that was here in North Carolina
At
Fayard?
Fayard's, Nancy and Paul Fayard's, Carolina Sky Sports.
That's tremendous. So I guess we'll get. So those are the stories: the cemetery, the trains. Is there anything else you remember that she told you that maybe we hadn't talked about that excited you? I guess the celebrities that she met, because I guess for quite a while she was out of the spotlight after she retired, and then Maxine Hicks.
Yes.
I guess my understanding, she was working for them.
Yeah.
Well,
I was in their employ or something, and I guess they figured out
they
who she
figured
was.
it, yes. Exactly.
And then they were big proponents of her. I mean, took her on,
They really got her going in the
and she met
aviation.
Doolittle, John Glenn. I mean, we've got a picture of her with
Omar Bradley.
Colonel Kittinger,
Jimmy
Jimmy Stewart. Yeah. So did she talk about Arthur Godfrey? Did she talk about any of that? Were they her friends? Did she mention any of that?
She mentioned it, and for a long time now, I was younger. When I would hear these names, Jimmy Doolittle and the other names that she would drop, Glenn Martin, I wondered, when I would hear it again out on the street, I said, why do I know that name? Do I know it because the person is famous for something? Or do I know it because I heard Grandma talking about it as a friend, you know? And come to find out, they were both friend and famous.
Well, yeah, she did. There's some great photos of her we went through them yesterday, piles of photos
Yes.
of her with just, a lot of the people we can't even identify. We know that they were somebody at that time, or probably just, I don't have enough research to know who a lot of these folks are. She ran with the big dogs in Hollywood for a while there.
And I would like to say that, talking about running with the big dogs, I always said, I don't care what ballpark she was in, she could play ball with you.
So she wasn't, she grew up poor, so that kind of mentality never really left her as far as understanding folks from all walks. I mean, she could party with a general, but then...
Exactly.
And she loved animals. That was a big thing.
Oh, yeah, she loved her animals. On the farm, she would go out and pet the cows.
Pet the cows, huh?
And she loved horse racing in California. That was one of her big deals.
Okay, she bet the horse, bet the ponies then, huh?
Yeah, she sent me a postcard one time and it had 3 horses coming across when the photo finished.
Okay.
nose to nose, and one of her friends had sent it to her and said, Tiny, I lost a gram on this race. You know? But her friends would send her stuff like that all the time.
That sounds like she lived a, some of these pictures, we see so many of the pictures of her, either old or under the wings of the plane, but got to see some where she, the middle years.
Yeah.
And she was really something. I mean.
Yeah. Of course, she was a citation fan.
Okay.
Because citation was the East Coast horse, and boy,
Oh, okay.
The East Coast, and she really thought a lot of citation, like many folks did.
So when she got hurt, you were home then when that happened, when she fell? I guess tripped over a dog in the back.
Yeah, she was going out to feed him and tripped over the dog and fell off the step, and that was the beginning of.
So she broke a hip, or what? Do we know what happened actually?
I don't. Yeah, she did break her hip.
Is that
Yeah,
what it is? Okay.
I was trying to remember. I couldn't, but
Okay.
Well, she got better, but she never.
yeah, she never recovered.
And she was in her 80s at that time. So.
Yeah.
So.
And so then, I guess we'll get on the sad subject of her passing. How did you guys find out? And they had to make arrangements for her to come back and all that.
Miss Maxine Hicks called us. She was our lifeline to Grandmama during the time she was sick.
Okay.
And she let us know that she had passed, and I think because of state laws, I think she had to stay in California for 3 days
3?
before she could be shipped
Okay.
back here. And once she arrived here, we did have the Golden Knights were pallbearers at a funeral.
So she was given great honors on her passing with the Golden Knights as pallbearers.
Yes.
And she planned her shipping back and all.
Okay.
She pre-planned all that. All we had to do was pick her up at the airport.
Okay, so she kept a lot of the grieving down for you guys because she had it all worked
She
out.
had it all arranged, yeah.
So how many folks how old were you when she passed?
Now, Bob, that's math again.
Okay, well, I'm just roughly. You don't tell me exactly.
I'm trying to think. Probably
I should know myself.
78,
78, so.
28,
Okay.
something in that area.
And you were in your 30s
maybe.
at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys were both living here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so where the funeral was in Fayetteville or?
Well,
It was
here.
It was here, okay.
Mhm.
So the Golden Knights, and how many people came up to, because, I mean, her home was in California, but was there any military or anybody besides the Golden Knights that honored her on her passing?
I don't recall any other.
Okay.
I know that the Golden Knights signed a book.
Yeah.
And we've got pictures of them, but I wondered why it wants some names on the back of the picture, but they signed her book instead.
Okay, so we can figure out who each person was.
Yeah.
We have the names
Yeah.
and we've got the pictures, and two friends of mine were Golden Knights who we have pictures with them, but they were the 4-way team, so they weren't it was the 8-way team, I guess, that laid her to rest. So.
Well, the 82nd Airborne were mighty good to her in Fayetteville. Just about every time she came home, she would get invited down there, and we'd take the family and watch them drop over the drop zone in the Jeeps and the tanks.
And give a big deal. They put a
Y'all
parade on
they
for
have
her.
a parade on. They'd walk
I
by.
was younger, Bob, when they were going to the Sicily drop zone.
Okay.
Man, I thought I was going out of the country, and I only ended up in Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
It was a big deal. Okay, well, I think this is going to wrap it up. I guess let's just say this in a sentence or two. How would you condense and she wasn't tiny to you guys, she was
Grandma Brown.
Grandma Brown.
All right.
So what did Grandma Brown mean to you personally? I mean, to share with the skydivers who didn't know her and the other folks, or know her by reputation. What would you say would be the best thing for people to know about your great grandmother?
Well, she was just a charming person to us. I can't say that she was really compared to Grandma Fortress, because she was the grandma we always knew.
Her daughter,
But
Verla.
at the same time, we felt the family connection. But just her adaptability to to all circumstances, was very good. And I tell everybody, she never got to be an old woman.
Okay.
She was,
Even in her 80s,
she never got old enough to be an old woman. She was just a charismatic senior citizen. And that's how she was. She just, the time I remember her, which I didn't see her much after she had the fall, she was in relatively good health. And I just remember her legs without her hose on were blue from
Yeah.
all the jumps.
oh goodness, even years, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, so what, same question for you, how would you wrap up for the people who didn't know Tiny, were blessed to know her, like myself?
Well, Ashton has used my words, charismatic. People were just drawn to her like a magnet. I have memories of going to the Nancy and Paul's drop zone with Grandmama, and the people were all over her. I mean, and she'd be sitting in a chair and people all on the floor listening to her stories on the ground though. And she always had a special twinkle in her eye. I can never forget it, and just how she carried herself so well in front of everybody she met. She was at home with them. She was at home with these talk show people, and she was at home with us. She was just a wonderful person whose life I'm so thankful I got to share a part with.
Well, and I want to thank you guys for inviting me down here to let me share some of your great grandmother's spirit, Tiny's spirit. It's been an enjoyable time. Thanks again, and I guess this is going to wrap it up. So, again, I'll let you introduce yourself to the camera as we wrap up. Just
Ashton Young.
Bonnie Young asked you.
And I'm Bob Lewis. Thank you for visiting.